iPredict works by gathering the knowledge of its 5,000 plus traders. If a stock has a price of 57 cents, that means the market thinks that event has a 57% chance of happening. If you agree, you buy. If you disagree, you short. And if you're right, you make money. Kia ora, good evening in New Zealand. This is day 2 until the country goes to the polls. Welcome to iPredict Election 2011, the most accurate source of political and economic information in New Zealand broadcasting. Our 3 predictions tonight. Prediction 1. The market have predicted New Zealand First as high as 6.4% and Mana as high as 2.6%. How has the mainstream media bias impacted on small party support? Prediction 2. The market have predicted National at 48% and ACT at 2%. What are the ramifications of a brash key government for the country? Prediction 3. The market is predicting higher unemployment and lower growth in Treasury are predicting, with the Germans unable to buy billions in debt today, the Dow dropping another 230 points and Chinese economic data suggesting a slowdown. How will implementing more free market economic policy protect New Zealand? To dissect these predictions, let me introduce tonight's panel. He is the original parliamentary rebel. He first entered national politics in 1975, fighting against Labour Party attempts to confiscate Māori coastal land, the leader of New Zealand First, the Right Honourable Winston Peters. And he is the new parliamentary rebel who also entered politics fighting against Labour Party attempts to confiscate Māori coastal land. What is it with the Labour Party always trying to steal Māori land? Leader of the Mana Party, Hone Harawira. Welcome to you both. We'll also wrap the show with a final prediction, but let's kick things off with tonight's first market prediction. iPredict stock have had New Zealand First as high as 6.4% and Mana as high as 2.6%. Has mainstream media bias impacted the smaller parties? Winston, you have been blacklisted by the mainstream media and you have only been allowed to participate recently because of a sudden jump in the polls. Whose interests do the mainstream media serve, the people or corporations?
Well, obviously corporations, because we live in a democracy, and if you don't want to show a player in the marketplace, it means you don't believe in competition, it means you don't believe in fairness, it means you think that you can actually skew the results. But it's had this effect. It's a bit like being a surfer. If you've ever done any surfing, you watch and that wave starts to build. You better know it's happening. They missed it. But the wave's rising strong now and it'll bring us home on election day.
Why do you think New Zealand First gains so much support right now?
Well, I think people don't like dirty tactics. They don't like people being pilloried and deceived and lied about and told that they're all sorts of, bogeyman. Crikey, I was beginning to think that we might have leading New Zealand First the devil incarnate and every extreme comment they could make. But New Zealanders are not stupid. Ordinary people out there have got common sense. They can read between the lines. And they are saying, well, if that's what their worry is, then their polls aren't telling them what they're saying. They're not confident, and so they are sticking in the dirt. And that's why these tactics are seriously going to fail in the next 36 hours.
John Key has specifically targeted you as enemy number 1. How does that feel?
Well, this is funny, isn't it? This is a guy whose party offered me a diplomatic post last year. Now, you don't send volatile, unstable, unworthy people into your major capitals of the world to represent your country. So that's what they've tried to do in one sense, while saying something else to the public. But then, let's not talk about the tapes, other than to say the tapes disclose what they are thinking privately as opposed to what they're telling people publicly. In the end, the great thing about democracy is the people decide.
Hone, the New Zealand Herald has written 3 separate editorials attacking you, and stuff.co.nz claimed you supported Osama bin Laden. How do small political parties bypass the mainstream media's bias?
Well, you can't actually. You can't, because they control so much newsprint, so much of the television, so much of the airwaves. All you have to do is just keep focusing on message, trying to get that message out as broadly as possible. I'm not sure whether New Zealand First got any advertising money, but we didn't get any. So we're up against that as well. Some of the ads have been really quite atrocious to watch on television particularly. But I think you just recognise that that's where they're going to be at, and then you just have to identify how best you're still going to try and get your message out. A lot of it is just action on the street. A lot of it is just picking up, like Winston was saying, picking up the momentum. You can feel it out on the street, whether or not they the mainstream media predicting it through their landline-based polls or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is and having been through 2-3 elections now, you know what the feeling is like on the street. And I'm comfortable with that.
You have, of course, felt the sting of those mainstream media landline polls. In your by-election, they claimed you were only ahead by 1%. You ended up being ahead by over 9%.
Yeah.
That's a huge margin.
Yeah. So that is about the message of getting it out to people about don't get too worried about the polls. Because in fact, there's so many polls going on as well that it's hard to follow just exactly what's going on at that level. So again, when you're on the street, just keep rolling the machine, just keeping the message out, and you can feel on the street whether or not the people are rolling with you. And if they're not, then you need to be worried. So I'm not particularly concerned what the mainstream media is saying about what the pollers are saying. What matters is where that wave is, that momentum is, what the feeling is on the street, and I'm comfortable with where we're at the moment.
Who's the worst mainstream media journalist you've had to deal with, Winston? I cannot believe the way you've been completely cut out of any real debate what's going on in this country. Who's the worst?
Well, there's not just one. There's a number of them who are actually. I think I'll leave it till election night.
A list, a Winston's list, perhaps?
Well, the fact
Sounds like
is,
a speech coming up.
the fact is that really, no matter what you think, if you're honourable and a professional person, you're prepared to hear the other side's argument. But editorial after editorial attacking someone, whilst you won't print what he's speaking about, whilst you won't print what 700 people heard at a meeting, these are big audiences, and they show market demand, but they are deliberately stopping them hearing it. And that's why it's hard to get the message away. But the other side of the coin is that when people finally hear the message, they think, well, why wasn't I told that? And this sort of Pyongyang, North Korea behaviour that some of these officers, media officers run, is not going to succeed, and it shouldn't succeed. And what I wanted to say to you and Willie and not Willie and Hone is, you know what? On election night, when their polls are all turned upside down, not one will apologise. They'll just carry on. They were deceiving the public for months. Is a fair thing to do. Not this time. This time, they're going to be scrutinised for how they've misled people. And this time, we must do something about our democracy.
I was talking on that. What changes would each of you like to see to public broadcasting to ensure corporate influence is minimised? Because currently, TVNZ are cozying up to Rupert Murdoch's Sky TV to allow access to our Freeview network. What would you like to see in terms of public broadcasting on it?
Oh, well, never mind just the Freeview network. The fact that Television One is allowed to become so much of a private network anyway. It's operating on the basis of commercial return. There's no longer any interest in what it is that the public are wanting to see, or the public interest at all, and a focus purely on the commercial return. That's dominating so much the news that in fact a lot of people stop watching the news now because you turn on 6 o'clock news and you see Paris Hilton doing something. So it's not even news, eh? And yet there's some really important stuff going on out there, and we need to make sure that the broadcasting environment gets, at least a section of it, is brought back so that there's a clear public interest being protected there.
Do we need to see more of a public broadcasting ethos?
Oh, undoubtedly. Look, the fact is that you can say what you like about the BBC, but it does present one of the great cultures of the world, as do the French and others. But here, and so does the ABC in Australia. But here in New Zealand, with all these cultures we've got here now, where's the one that's actually trying to fuse all the cultures in what I call an emerging modern New Zealand? It doesn't exist. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. And the second thing is, where's our reach out into the Pacific? We're an important nation here. Where do people in Vanuatu, Tonga, or Samoa hear about this country when we've given it all over to Canada, Australia? All sorts of things like that are really not in our interest. And above all, what you need to do is you're not trying to run a profit-making thing. You're trying to run a cultural monitor, elevator of an emerging culture at no cost to you, which can be done. But you cannot have what I call, the victims of their own importance who've somehow lost sight of the fact that they work for this marvellous group called the New Zealand taxpayer. And you wouldn't think so, would you? And just one thing about Murdoch. He had to, when he went to the United States, become an American citizen to get a look in. Here, no such requirement. Open slather, and that's a serious issue, because if there's an added value in our market, in advertising and everything else, called the media value in the economy, who's getting it?
Not us.
Not a lot of us not coming to us, no.
Currently, Hone, the market predicts Mana on 2%. Where will your party vote be on election night? What's your prediction?
I've been watching mainly a lot of the street polls that have been getting run by different organisations, and I'm comfortable with where we're sitting at the moment. I would like to see us bring in myself. I'm still predicting actually that Annie's going to take Waiariki, and I'm hoping that we can get John and Sue. I'm quite comfortable.
2.9%. That's where you're looking
at? That's right. I'm comfortable with John, and I think if we work hard over the next 24 hours, there's not a lot of time yet, but we just keep putting that message out there. I just think that there isn't a clear voice for the poor, and I want us to be very clear that we don't have any other interest right now except being a voice for those who don't actually have a voice in Parliament.
Yeah. Winston, currently the market predicts New Zealand First on 4.3%. Where do you think you will be post the election?
No, 6.4.
6.4%?
No, that's what the current prediction is.
Oh, it's been as high as that. It's been as high as 6.4.
Yes. I don't make those sort of predictions.
No.
I look at the incorrect polls of the last 4 elections and what the multiplier effect was on election day. That's what is going to apply this election day. Even if it's only half right, then we're going to make a strong comeback.
You're in?
Yes, New Zealand First will make a very strong comeback.
Thank you, panel. Let's move on to prediction 2. The market have predicted National at 48% and ACT at 2%. What are the ramifications of a brash Key government for the country? Winston, if John Key is prepared to sell 49% of our state assets, Don Brash will certainly sell the remaining 51%. How will a Key brash government impact New Zealand?
Well, we're not going to have one for a start.
Okay.
The second thing is...
but hypothetically, if one occurred...
Well, enough New Zealanders can see. Look, the fact is, we're in this campaign, and it's been going on all year, but after the Rugby World Cup, it's heightened. But where is the clear understanding that New Zealanders have of what politicians think of the world economy and ours? Things are very, very bad internationally. Mr. Key has done his best to not say that. He's talking about a brighter future, and this and that, and we all know that there's blood, sweat and tears coming for us. And the only way we're going to get through it is A, acknowledging it, and B, make up our mind that there's going to be equal pain for everybody and equal gain when we get out of it. But that's what New Zealand needs now. Not, smiling is not an economic plan. Being optimistic is not an economic plan. Talking about being aspirational is not an economic plan. These are attitudes of mind. But New Zealanders, from the rich to the poor, and downtown's Queen Street, that's what you're hearing, that this government has no plan. It has wasted 3 years on the issues that Willie talks about, on poverty, on people who need housing and other things. But they've also wasted the wealth creation, sustainable wealth creation, as a plan for New Zealand to get our way out of it. Singapore, Norway, along comes the economic crisis and they barely blinked. We are seriously vulnerable, and I'm not trying to frighten people now, it's too late to. All I want them to know is, on election night, we are in for a very tough time. And the sooner we have a cohesive, united, everyone shares in the problem and everyone shares in the benefits approach, then that's the only way we'll get through it.
For 2 decades, you have talked about economic sovereignty and the importance of New Zealand being able to own its assets.
And savings.
Is there a certain amount of, I suppose you can't be glib about this, but a lot of the arguments you've been talking about for a very long period of time have come home to roost, haven't they?
Well, look, I believe that there's going to be a day of reckoning, and if we didn't turn around what we were doing. 14 years ago, we went to the country with a massive savings program based on a straight tax cut, no pain. You save it, you personally save it, and we would get together the investment to take back our sovereignty. That's a real plan. It gives me no pleasure now. In fact, it's one of the saddest things that at the time we put that into place, you had groups like the Business Roundtable and National, and indeed Labour, attacking it for political reasons with no thought of how about joining this. Look, I supported the Cullen Fund, Kiwi Bank, the Kiwi Saver, because it was better than doing nothing. Now, the day of reckoning has come. And the same people who didn't want to go for that, who were very selfish politically in what their reaction was, are now saying, trust me, I can take our country forward. I'm the best business manager. Let me tell you one last thing. If anybody watching this television station thinks that training in gambling and speculating in other people's futures on Wall Street is a training ground for New Zealand, then please think again. For running this country, you need experienced and practical people who understand both how small business works, not speculation, but how small business really works, and how ordinary people can contribute to making this country a great country as we once were. We were number one in the world once.
Hone, under National, we have 250,000 children in poverty, while we borrowed $2 billion to fund tax cuts for the rich. If such social injustice is the popular will of the people, shouldn't you just accept it?
It's clearly not the popular will of the people. It's the way in which it's been pitched so that, and you'll note that although John Key talks about it, so does Don Brash, and after a variation, so does Peter Dunn, which is to continue the trend of giving the rich a few more tax cuts and assuming that there's going to be a trickle down. It hasn't happened for the last 25 years. People have just been getting poorer and poorer to a point where I don't actually think that they can bleed any more money. They've just gotten to a point of desperation where sooner or later, I think that if we don't manage our way out of this intelligently, things are going to blow. And all of that talk about open up our resources and sell even more. I hate to say it, but Winston's right. We are so locked into the global marketplace right now that any assumption from the Prime Minister or from the Deputy Prime Minister that things are fine and the whole world's going to fall over, but we're going to get through, it's just a flat-out lie. It's a flat-out lie. And I think New Zealanders should be justifiably concerned about where we are right now and start taking the kinds of steps that are required to get a hold of our own economic assets and, if necessary, start cutting away some of these free trade agreements that are locking us into arrangements whereby other companies, other countries can sue us for daring to stop them from mining in our seas.
Can I just give one little example? Hone be interested in this. Look, you know, up north, the north of Hikurangi, there's all these dairy farms, right? All the way to Kaitaia. All that milk is shipped down to south of Hikurangi to Kauri. No cheese factory at Kaitaia. All these enterprises we could have. All the timber, all shipped down south. No jobs in all those places. Now, we lost the plot on rural industry in small towns. We said if they can't be efficient and beat China, who can get a worker, they can get 80 workers for one of ours, then we should give over the competition to them. Well, you know what I'd say to politicians, doctors, and all these PR experts and television people, I might tell you, Brahma? Well, try you up against China on that cost structure, and you'll all be gone. So let's go back and make sure that we recover rural New Zealand, small towns, fishing, forestry, all these things we can do. Plus, the great thing about IT is you can have a successful business worldwide sitting in Kaitaia.
Now, question to both of you. Why do you think John Key is so popular? Is it 3 years of uncritical media coverage, or do New Zealanders generally like him? What do you think it is?
I think it's kind of difficult to not like the guy when the opposition is so weak.
Right.
I mean, Phil Goff's hardly an alternative.
Sure.
He's been around so very long, and his politics have changed so much. I mean, he was there at the table with a big smile on his face when they announced the whole Rogernomics plan. He was there when they introduced GST. He was there way back in all of those days. And now he's trying to talk like, oh, I'm a socialist. And people, I just don't think people buy him anymore, and haven't ever since he's been the leader of Labour. And so, because he's been so weak and continues to be so weak, right in, even in the run up to the election, and with a strong program against asset sales, even with all of that, people have just given up on him. And because our political broadcasting and presentation style has been very presidential, it's been John Key or Phil Goff rather than the policies. And on that basis, my dog would do better than Phil Goff.
Does Hone have a point there?
Well, I think he's being a bit harsh.
To poor old Phil?
Well, it's not our job to promote. You don't sell fish and pike or washing machines by talking about Simpson and all the rest, do you?
Of course.
But come back to my point. I tell you why he's popular, because there's been no scrutiny, no cross-examination, no questioning of what he said. I'll give you an example. He says, my model for privatisation and flogging off these assets is Air New Zealand. What a great mixed model that is. Really? Look, he knows that the private investors in Air New Zealand bought for $1, it's still $1. They're the most passive. They have no say whatsoever in the management of Air New Zealand. Air New Zealand is a sound management and personnel plan that's doing some brilliant work. It is not a model for what he's talking about at all.
Yeah.
Second thing is, I can tell him, as he should well know, because he started off with these guys, take what Faye Richwhite got hold of the BNZ. They only had a third shareholding. Down goes the bank. $1 billion later, we had to bail it out. Then it's flogged off to the National Australia Bank. Now they're sucking money out of this country in their billions every year, and that's the model he wants. And my third thing I want to say to Mr. Key is, you don't make up the figures as you go along. They've got 600 extra police. We got 1,000. And to top it off, we got 235 people to back them up in the office. And to top that off, we went to a great institution that was totally neglected called the Maori Wardens and gave them tools and equipment, vehicles and phones so that they could reconnect with their people. And where they've operated, there's been a significant drop in crime. Do they get any credit for that? Not so much as a thank you. What he says is, I did it and Judith Collins did it, and that's humbug.
What, will National gain 48% of the vote? You think that's too high, or they're going to get lower than that?
Oh, got to say, I'm not even focusing on what National's doing, and I don't really care what's happening with ACT, although it's worth watching for a chuckle.
Sure.
To watch Paul Goldsmith from National taking down his billboards so that John Banks can get in, and then Labor rushing in and putting them back up again.
Yes, yes.
So I don't want to worry too much about what they're doing and just focusing on our message.
Thank you, panel. Moving on to prediction 3. The market is predicting higher unemployment and lower growth than Treasury predicting. How on earth will New Zealand get back? We'll get back to surplus by 2015. Winston, with the Germans unable to buy billions in debt today, the Dow dropping another 230 points, and Chinese economic data suggesting a slowdown, why are we implementing more free market dogma to counter a global recession caused by free market dogma?
Well, now, I can't answer in the positive as to why you do that unless you've got no memory or you refused to abandon the interests of the few, what a famous American president called overmighty subjects, and decide to govern for the many. The only reason why you'd persist in this is that the people who paid for all those hoardings and the most expensive campaign in New Zealand politics has ever seen want their pound of flesh. But if you want to govern for the many, we can get our way out of this, but a lot of the problems we've got now, we do not have the buffer, and I'm sad to say this. We need not necessarily go into higher unemployment. We need not necessarily go into a greater level of indebtedness. What we need now is one plan that the people in the mass majority are united on to get ourselves out of it. Because if we don't work together, I tell you, we're going to go really down in the first world.
Hone, why should the poor in New Zealand do with less for an economic recession none of them had a hand in causing?
Yeah. I mean, this economic recession that we're in right now, if you just look to what's happening overseas and all across Europe, even in America, if their answer is to free market and even more free market, it's madness. It's madness on the grand scale, and the Germans have already declared that they're wanting out of this game.
Yep.
The French are starting to pull back from this game. Europe, I think, is going to start pulling back and start doing things differently. But at the end of the day, if we pick up on the notion that a single political activity to rebuild the country, if we was to go back and say, like, we're going to take everybody off the unemployment register and put them back into work in positive community work, whether it's in schools, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's in old people's homes or kaumatu and queer flats, it may not be long term, and it may not be that kind of sustainable employment that everybody talks about. But if you just put everybody back to work, you watch families change. And once families start to change, when a person's working, they say, oh, I can do better than this. the family home is happier, the community is happier, the society improves. Yes, there's going to be a cost to it, but the cost of us not starting to say we have to focus on us and know what's happening across the other side of the world. If we don't take up that challenge now, it's going to be too late for us to take it up later.
Question to both of you. Mana and New Zealand First are deeply opposed to asset sales. Would either party consider a supply and confidence agreement to help a Labour Green minority government to stop National from gaining power? Could we see a New Zealand First Mana Party power block?
Look, you don't need a supply and confidence agreement to say that you're opposed to asset sales. You just make a commitment to go through with the promise you made to the people. Just want to go back one point, you know. This world, the world, US, UK, Europe is teetering now, and everybody's looking at what's there, and they're not looking at something that is so patently obvious. How did we get there? You can't have 1% of the US owning 40% of the wealth. You can't have the wealthy rich list of the UK going up 30% last year, or here 20%. It's time to reach to them and say, you have got to make an even contribution too. And that is a way out, but this is a huge battle going on, and it's best epitomised by the Republican Party at the moment. Screaming blue murder, for example, about a health scheme for America, when you know 4 out of 10 don't get any health treatment properly. Screaming about a health scheme for America that Maggie Thatcher would have found a bit tough.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's how outrageous these demands have become from a certain clique. And they're not conservative. They're not people of class and taste and some elegance. They've got no sense of human or social or political responsibility. That's what it comes down to here. And I tell you, your predictions on the National Party are way out. My phone calls and my emails coming in from National Party people say that they are dead scared of the National Party getting to government alone. That's why that poll of 48% is going to be dramatically wrong come Saturday night.
Could we see more cooperation between Mana and the New Zealand First if you two are, as a power bloc, hold the balance of power?
You know, there are simple principles, and if one of them is that our assets are our assets, you know, and selling them off tomorrow means we will never ever benefit from them, then we can work with just about anybody who holds to that belief, because it's a simple belief based on the fact that those assets were built up by our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. They weren't provided to us in today's world so we could flog them off, so our children would have to pay higher prices and our grandchildren have to pay even higher prices. The way that's going, if we're not careful, our grandchildren will grow up in a land owned by somebody else. Now, there are a number of parties that have similar views, and we'd be comfortable working with whomever to ensure that that kind of activity can't take place.
It's cooperation. Look, it's cooperation, not coalition. And cooperation on similar causes, we're not going to agree on a lot of things, but on cooperation on some big issues is going to be very important after the election.
Final word, final prediction, Hone.
Oh, I don't have any final predictions except to say that I will enjoy my travels all the way back home on Saturday. I'll enjoy a good night with the folks on Saturday night. I look forward to being back on television on Sunday with other leaders and other MPs in the discussion of where we go to, and I hope that Mana goes in with a very positive team.
Winston, your final prediction.
Well, the punters behind iPredict could have made a lot of money if they'd listened to us about a month ago.
Anything else?
No, that's what I predict.
Thank you, Hone. Thank you, Winston. To my final prediction, as we reach the final few days of trading, there are some rich pickings ready for plucking in the market. At 12%, Jacinda Ardern in Central Auckland is a buy. Peter Dunn and Oharu at 69% is a short, and National to win in Epsom at 45% is worth a punt. On the panel tomorrow night, I'm joined by National Party Minister Tim Grosser and NBR columnist Matthew Hooton. Follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook accounts for all my latest election updates. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow, 7 p.m. for iPredict Election 2011, exclusively on Stratus TV. Until then, get trading.